Hello, everybody. Wildman Z here with another episode of my comic book reviews. We're going into the Dark Phoenix Saga, which is really around the time that I picked up the X-Men. I'm around 12 or 13 years old, and I'm getting blown away by awesome comic books that include awesome covers like the one you see here. This is during a time of what we would call a run. A run is basically when you have a creative team, usually the artist and the writer are the two main people. Inkers and all that are important as well, as of course. But this was John Byrne as the artist and co-plotter, and Chris Claremont writing it. Chris Claremont pretty much, when the X-Men relaunched quickly in the late 70s, hops on the book and goes all the way through until the early 90s, continuously, with various artists, including John Byrne. I would argue that that run there is the best, or one of the best runs in comic books, along with, let's say, for example, Roy Thomas and John Buscema on Conan, and several other runs, or Walter Simonson's Thor. These are notable runs in at least in Marvel Comics, and I could probably name about 10 of them off the top of my head that are just like, somebody said, tell me some great issues of comics to read, I would recommend those runs. And most of them are found in some sort of compiled form, because even Marvel knows these are good and a lot better than anything they're putting out today. That's for sure. Today's comics, and I love comic books, and I hate to say this, but Marvel and DC Comics of the current stock, not the stuff they're reprinting from back in the day, but to me and to most guys in my age range, from let's say 40 into their 60s, who are the old school comic book fans, I haven't met any of my peers that like them. Maybe they're out there, but very few books that they're putting out these days are good. But at any rate, this stuff is great, and there's plenty of it to read. So this is X-Men number 132. At this point in time, there's only really one main X-Men book. They didn't have various books at this point. If you were reading X-Men, you're reading this. And I think the New Mutants had just come out, or was coming out very soon at this point in time. So basically, this was your mutants. These were your freakish characters. And in the old days, they used to have these little heads on the cover, which I really liked, is Wolverine, the woman is Storm, the blue fella is Nightcrawler, the metal man is Colossus, and you had Cyclops. He was actually from the original team. And so what we're in the Dark Phoenix Saga and the Hellfire Club storyline, and what happened is the X-Men have been infiltrated and attacked several times by a group they learn is called the Hellfire Club, but there's like a club in New York called the Hellfire Club. They're like rich people, and they find out from Warren Worthington, like, no, I'm a member of that club, they're cool. Well, it's an inner circle within that club. They still call themselves the Hellfire Club, but they're the inner core of it. Everything else is kind of a front for those guys to be down in the basement, dressed up like ye old aristocrats, but their machinations are to rule the world. They're kind of implied to be like the Illuminati and the Masons, like they got all sorts of secrets and they're down there planning stuff. At least that's how we imagine them. I think their Masons are down there shooting some hand signs and watching old movies and stuff, but people want to imagine they got a UFO down there. Maybe they do. Anyway, this is the X-Men infiltrate the club. They get tromped. The Hellfire Club pretty much knows all their weaknesses. For example, let me find some pics here. I got these old comics out. They know all the X-Men's weaknesses. They know that Storm is going to, this guy Sebastian Shaw knows that he's going to get hit with a lightning bolt. And so she blasts him, she tries to kick him, but he can channel energy. So all that stuff she does to him initially, she doesn't know he can channel energy. He just turns it around on her and knocks her behind out. They tromp the team in a pretty much a fell swoop here. One of the things that happens early on is that Wolverine he was hiding out in the sewers initially, but he comes in once his team's in trouble. He confronts this. He calls him Tubby, get out of the way, this guy here. That's Harry Leland. Harry Leland is a mutant who can channel, who can increase your density, or your mass per unit volume, and he basically does that to Wolverine. I don't know if he knows that Wolverine has adamantium bones, because he's kind of surprised when Wolverine rockets through the floor. I think he thinks he killed him. Of course he didn't. Wolverine ends up in the sewer, which lends to one of the greatest last panels that I can think of in a comic book off the top of my head, which is the Wolverine emerging from the sewer panel right here. Check that out, how cool that is. And what does he say here? He says, okay, suckers, you've taken your best shot. Now it's my turn. And so, what's going to happen the next issue is that Yep, and this cover blew me away when I got it on the stand. We used to get comics back in the day at places like gas stations, and we didn't really have. There was no comic book shops, but like pharmacies. Like this was at Genovese, which was a pharmacy chain, kind of like Rite Aid is today. But they'd have a magazine rack and a newspaper stand, and they'd have comics in there, Marvel and DC generally. And all the big names. You'd have a section of DC like Superman, Batman, Action, Detective, Wonder Woman, the JLA, all that. And then you had the Avengers, the FF, and then I discovered the X-Men there. It was like, one book. The Avengers they had the Avengers, but then the Cap had a book and Iron Man. So you were inundated with those type of characters. But these guys just had their one little book, and the issue number 131 really caught my eye. So now we're couple issues into that. Check out this cover. I remember getting this on a newsstand. I couldn't wait. I'd go back every couple weeks waiting for it to come out. And I mean, when you're a kid and you see that, I mean, this guy, at this point, we don't know much about Wolverine, right? We know he's a Canadian. We know he's really tough and he's short and like he's real, I don't know, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's always getting in fights. He calls slummers. He calls them Slim or Kid. He's always like, get out of the way, Slim Summers. And Xavier, he doesn't ever calls him Professor Xavier. He doesn't even call him Charles. He usually calls him Chuck or Chuckles or Chrome Dome, some name like that. But Wolverine, we start to see what a stand-up dude he is in this issue. I mean, I don't really care about the powers, but the personality is more important for me. Some readers really love powers. I like caricature and the characters, and it's like you realize how true he is to his crew in this issue. He comes off the ceiling, and these guys who he's fighting, they're all Hellfire Club minions. They're mercenaries, these guys, and supply. These guys are bad guys that are real mercs, and they delineate in this comic very carefully where he'll trash these guys using his claws, but with guys who are just like cops for hire or security guards just working a job, he doesn't use the claws on them. He'll fight them straight up. But this is like where I first realized that Wolverine was like had some kind of real recovery power, like beyond taking a punch. He gets blasted dead in the chest with a machine gun, and they think he's dead. They walk over there, and then he ends up coming out over here on the bottom panel, coming out of the off the floor and taking a guy out with a slashing cut to the chest. Those guys who he fights end up not dying or being resurrected if they did die temporarily and become the Reavers. They're cybernetics, sort of like Donald Pierce. I'm trying to think if they show up in any of the movies yet, but they're similar to some of the characters that showed up in that one the last Wolverine movie when they came out to get Wolverine. Pierce comes out to get them, and he's got some guys who are like mercs with him, and some of those mercs had some bionics on them. So they're kind of like that, but they were more bionic. Like some of them are rolling on like little mini tanks and stuff like that. I guess he damaged their legs really badly. So he comes in, and it's a pitched fight where he's fighting both mercs and security guards and the whole bit in the club, trying to do a one-man rescue of his team, taking it. At the same time that's going on, which is a big part of the issue, Cyclops is fighting on the side plane. That's Cyclops in the foreground. In the background is Jason Weingard. He's fighting him in the old Enlightenment era, late 17, early 1800s type of motif. He's fighting him in a sword fight on the side plane or the astral plane. Basically, Weingard is challenging the heart of Jean Grey for her love of Cyclops. He's trying to displace that, and I guess Jean is somehow witnessing that psychically. So at the end of this is back in the real world, is Cyclops is dead on the floor. There's Jean Grey in the motif of the Black Queen with Weingard next to her, and all the rest of the X-Men are subjugated in chains and so forth. The next issue, these covers are all great. I'll be saying that every time. Like another great cover is the lineup here. We have the X-Men facing off against the Hellfire Club with the Dark Phoenix in the background. They called her the Dark Queen at this point, and then the Phoenix is behind her. So she's been kind of seduced by the dark side, if you will, and is a crony of the Hellfire Club now. They know she's got a lot of power. She's really more powerful than all of them, probably to get put together. And here we got OJ on the front cover there. You're going old school when you see OJ. Let's see if he's on the back cover. Sometimes OJ's on the back. Here he goes. OJ's on the back doing OJ Dingoes. Everybody wanted a pair. He's huge. I mean, he was a great athlete back in the day. Unfortunate what happened to him. So what happened to his ex-wife and her lover? More so, but you're seeing here the really great art. You're seeing the X-Men as they are. You're seeing the X-Men as they're being perceived by Jean Grey, as the old motif. Aurora's seen as a slave. Nightcrawler's seen as like a little, I don't know, like a little European type of guy with a little mustache going. And that's what's going on in her mind's eye. And then we've been realizing for about an issue or two that, spoiler alert, that Jason Weingard is actually Mastermind. Mastermind was an old classic X-Men villain going back to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in like issue 1 or 2. He was teamed up with Magneto, the Blob, and some other characters back then. And he was an illusionist. He could make the physical world look like he cast minor illusions, if you will. But he's upped his game to like now being able to go in your mind and project illusions into your dreams and create whole scenarios and fantasies. And so he's really, whether it's he's training or somehow his mutant powers grew over time, they don't really say, but he is more powerful than he was by far, and he's really trying to manipulate the whole club. I think he wants to take over with Jean Grey. He's not really down with these other guys. Like Shaw and Pierce don't like him. Leland doesn't say much, but here is Jean. She's acting like she's putting a whammy on the X-Men, but in reality, she unlocks Cyclops' metal hood that he has on, must be ruby quartz, and then he blasts it off and he takes out a dude with it. He takes out, it looks like Pierce, and so she gets triggered by seeing Cyclops get defeated and potentially die, and that sends her back onto the right trail. Leland and Wolverine meet off again, and it's implied. Initially, I thought that Wolverine killed Leland. Leland increased Wolverine's density, but Wolverine just comes right on down on top of him, drives him into the floor. You see the claws kind of going into him, but Leland survives because he shows up later in the X-Men, a few years later. He's kind of a minor bad guy, and he really wasn't that evil when it came down to it. You can tell he kind of was working with these guys because he probably had a lust for money, but he really wasn't evil. He comes back later when the X-Men are facing off against Nimrod, and he sacrifices his life to beat Nimrod, like willingly. Like he knows he's going to die. And Wolverine says something like, Tubby wasn't all bad, kind of thing. Wolverine's just like, whatever, They beat Shaw. They see now the X-Men are realizing these guys' power sets. And so Nightcrawler uses his agility to confuse Shaw. He's the energy channeler. And in the meantime, Storm, as I think Shaw calls her, a weather witch, she kind of freezes the air around him, and she takes power out of him, not through much from energy or a blast, but from freezing him out. So there's a scene in here where he's getting cold, and he's like weather witch, something like that. And so they use now that they learned what some of the powers of the Hellfire Club from round 1, the X-Men with their training. See, the X-Men, they are like trained. They got the danger room. They're all about moves and stuff. They're not like random fighters. The X-Men have like as they develop on, they get specialized moves they use. But I'm running out of time here. These are awesome comics. I'll pick up with that issue next time. Wildman